this morning, I should say, is Sharon Collier. And she is the founder of the Good Death Experience. She's an end of life consultant, which also could be known as a death doula. And she has quite a background, but she also has a beautiful passion for this work. And she's going to also share a rather wonderful personal story, as well as some of what she's professionally experienced. So thank you so much for being with us, Sharon. I'm going to go to Suzanne first. And Suzanne, I want to just ask you, interesting, I love that you're a farmer, so you've got that connection to the earth, as well as a philosopher, and certainly, obviously, like most of the people on this who watch this show, a spiritual practitioner. And so I wanted to just ask you for maybe kind of get us started with how our connection to Mother Earth and our connection to coming into the body and leaving the body, some of what you've learned and some of your kind of maybe overview about that.
Well, I mean, my attraction to agriculture, of course, and my attraction to green burial, I guess, is no mistake in many ways. And in many ways, I think for me has been fueled, or I'm not sure which came first, by this kind of scholarly path that I've been on, that really has largely been trying to kind of unearth essentially how we've come to separate ourselves from the natural world. Why is it that human beings see themselves, not necessarily our audience, but the larger sort of overwhelming knowledge bases, see ourselves as separate from nature or separate from the environment? And of course, when we look at, say, like the organic agriculture movement or, grassroots movements around food and growing, we see that that's all about interconnection and all about, reclaiming our place, our rightful place, right, in the natural world, and not perpetuating those distances. And green burial is much the same thing, right? The green burial movement has largely been about the outcomes of that, and I think the impetus for that, about largely recognizing that we have a place in the natural world and that these barriers that we've set up are false. And in fact, not only do living human beings have a place in the natural world when it comes to entering into these green burial spaces, but the dead also have a space, right? Have a place. And for a long time, we have set up barriers because of the kinds of funerary practices that we've been involved in over the last 150 years or so, that have kind of imagined in many ways that the dead body doesn't belong to nature, which of course couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth, right? So so I guess those interconnections are what excite me.
We're going to hear a lot from Suzanne. And a question has already come in from Unify. Ed, watching on Unify. And welcome to all of our friends watching on the different Facebook pages, the YouTube channels. You're all welcome. You also can all come on into our Zoom room. You can just go to globalpeacetribe.com, and register. And when you register, you're going to get the links for all of our shows for the next 3 months, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. I forgot to mention that. So you can go to globalpeacetribe.com and register. But Ed asks a question which I'd love for all of you at different times to answer, which is, do you believe, or can we see that when we die and we leave our physical body, we're moving on to another world or to the next world? And we spoke about that a lot last night. Certainly would love to hear some of your thoughts about that. And that might be a good one for Star Wolf, and a chance to kind of bring you on again. Welcome. Thanks for coming back again.
Thanks, Scott. It's a delight to be here. And, for me, I live in between the worlds all the time because I embraced the shamanic path many, many years ago. And some of my first moving into the other world experiences were through psychedelics in the 60s and in the 70s, and having otherworldly experiences. But then I also had a near-death experience with some drugs when I was 19 years old. And I clinically died on the table in an institution. and was above my body and could look back and see myself. And this is something you hear, this is nothing actually that unique. It happens a lot. A lot of times it goes unreported, but I could see myself and I could see everybody working on me. And I was thinking, why is everybody so frantic? And, I'm fine. And then I could hear the doctors or people there saying, I don't think she's going to make it. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up 3 days later. And so that was my first experience. And I thought, well, was I still just in this psychedelic experience that I was in? But obviously then when I checked with the doctors and everything there, they didn't even tell me. And then the nurse said to me, you died. Okay. And I've had some other near-death experiences. I was struck by lightning while teaching up on top of our mountain a few years ago, holding a microphone during a thunderstorm. I don't recommend doing that. But it came through and it came through the microphone and it went in and I was electrocuted. And my students were horrified. Of course, I just fell down and went out of body and then came back. But in the time that I thought that I went and came back, I went someplace else. And what I saw myself shoot up beyond the clouds and was over in the sunlight. And there were luminous kinds of beings, vibrations or frequencies in front of me that I thought were intelligent beings, but I couldn't really see them. And they asked me the question, are you ready to drop your physical body or would you rather drop your old ego identity? And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body. Now, to the group there, I was out for a few minutes and they were working with me and the storm was so horrific. Nobody could leave to go get help or do anything. It was so powerful. But I came back and all I could remember was, do you want to drop your ego identity, your old ego identity, or your body? And it was a beautiful place. I was in no pain. Now, when I came back, my whole body hurt. Okay. So I don't have time to go into the details of all of that, but I've had numerous experiences. It seems that my life, this lifetime, has been about learning to walk between the worlds. So a long time ago, I began to delve into shamanism because that's what it talked about, that we die all the time. Every time we exhale, we die. And every time we inhale, we're born. And that's something that goes on from the beginning of life till the end of life. So in answer to that question for me, I have no doubt about the other worlds, none. And there's many worlds, there's many dimensions. And a whole lot of it depends on where we are, what we experience. When we make peace with ourselves and with death and birth, there's a way that we enter into a place where there is no fear with death. There's just not. It's just like walking into the other room.
It's such a blessing to have had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience or to have an experience of a multidimensional self. I'm fortunate that I've had several of those as well. And it's a blessing because then we know, oh, wow, I really am not just this body. And so I want to say for those of you who have had experiences like this, tell us about it. I'll read some of them in the chat box, whether you're watching on Unify. That's when I look down there, I'm always looking at what's happening on Facebook. Or if you're in our Zoom room, tell us about your experiences. And I'll read them, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. And I also want to address anybody who hasn't had that experience, how challenging it can be. You're hearing us all talk about it, but it's kind of like hearing us all talk about what it's like to be, on a trip to Hawaii or to Europe, but you've never been there, so you're just kind of hearing about it. And maybe we'll even talk about, I'm sure Star Wolf will talk about ways that we can have experiences of leaving our bodies without taking LSD or whatever psychedelic of choice that might have been. All right, I'm going to go to our other guest, and this is Sharon Collier. And I think I wanted to ask you, as a death doula, What are some of the ways that you've helped people who haven't had an out of body experience, who haven't experienced that they are more than their body? How have you helped people like that as they get ready to leave the body?
Hi. So for me, I've really had a tremendous amount of experience of working with people in hospice prior to their transitioning. And one of the things that has been what I found to be quite similar amongst each person is that they have all wondered, where are we going after we leave here, what the experience of death would be. And one of the things I've always told them is death is a part of the living process. So to be experiencing death, understand that you're still living, and to be able to work with your breath. And I'm also a licensed massage therapist. And for me, one of the things I do at the bedside was to provide therapeutic massage. And I would, in tune, sit at the foot of the bed and I would do synchronistic massage that would help work with the breath. And also I would be in sync with the breathing of the patient. And that would also help them to relax, soothe their anxiety, and to be able to sometimes transition peacefully. And sometimes I would know intuitively, spiritually, when I would need to leave the room and it was time for that person to transition in peace, or for the family to return to the room and be with the patient during the transition. So for me, it's just been quite intuitive. And I've always just encouraged patients to use the breath and work with the breath.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And you brought up something interesting, which is that quite often the person who is dying, at a certain point, sometimes they want to be left alone for that final passage. Last night, we had a fascinating man. It was a doctor who came to us all the way from the Himalayas, and he works with rural areas helping people to transition. And he talked about that it's really important to honor the death process. And when people are beginning to see other things, not to change that, not to get in the way of their process. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Because it's an important piece that we don't always hear.
Right. Well, I definitely would like to add to that the family perspective of that, and the friends there and the loved ones that are around the dying person. Another thing for them is to be able to allow the process to happen as well, and to experience the process along with the patient, because a part of a lot of times they're going through different processes of grief and different emotions, and anxiety, and sometimes panic. All different types of energies are in the room. So as a doula, we work with the whole room. You don't just work with the patient. So you're working with the family. You're actually working with the caregivers as well too, because the caregivers are interacting with the family, and the dynamics of the family with the caregiver and the patient with the caregiver. And it's just a lot of energies going on in the room. So to be able to take the energy in the room and balance it as a doula, that's very important. And being able to communicate to the family that this is what you're there for, this is what you're doing, and for them to be able to receive you and allow you and accept you into the process as a stranger is very important too, that they understand your presence and be able to allow you to assist them with being able to let the process happen.
Very, very important. Let's all remember that. It was interesting. I was very close to my mother, and I lived with her the last 6 weeks of her life. We set up hospice she'd been in an assisted living facility, and we were able to set up hospice there, and I moved in with her. And I was with her nonstop for 6 weeks. And finally, after 6 weeks, and we knew she was close to the end, I had a really important meeting that I had to go to. And actually, it was a talk. I was giving a talk. She said, you go to the talk. I left, and we did have a nurse who came in, and the nurse was waiting in another room. Literally 30 minutes after I left is when Mom left her body. It was like she wanted to be alone for that.
Yeah.
So I kind of learned that experience. We are beginning to get some comments. And again, I want to acknowledge just the diversity of experiences that people have. So it's really cool. I've been checking. We've got people from Australia, Canada, all over the United States, from Brooklyn, New York to California watching. So again, welcome everybody. And I'm going to read a few comments and then do another round of questions for all of you, and you can all maybe respond to some of these questions and comments coming in. Melinda writes, I have many memories, including the death of my sister, who passed 4 years before I was born. It's my belief that there are many worlds, bodies, and heavens to transition to. Like Stars said, we go exactly where we are needed. On kind of the other side of the scale, and I so appreciate Mary vulnerably saying this, Mary writes, I have a deep, paralyzing fear of death, dysfunctional, insomnia. I need support. So I definitely want to invite some of you to respond to Mary. George writes, I have not connected my insomnia with fear of death until now. Bingo. I've heard sleep described as little death. So again, that might be something that one of you may want to comment on. Nancy writes, what if the fear of death is really the fear of living life to the fullest? Every moment thinking about death is a moment not thinking about life. So there are some opening comments from our Zoom room people. Next time I'll read comments from our friends on Unify and Facebook. Would anybody like to address perhaps Mary's concern? You can just, Starwolf. Okay, Starwolf and then Suzanne. I'll bring you both in.
I really understand that deep, almost phobic fear of death. My grandmother that I was extremely close to, she was really the first shaman I knew. And she was a very close to nature person and on the farm and barefoot. And as a little girl in Western Kentucky growing up and being a very sensitive child, she put me into nature right away and she grounded me. She was my grounding cord. And then she died unexpectedly on December 31st, right after my 12th birthday. And I had really scary dreams. And she even came to me in dreams that felt like nightmares and things. So I think it was my child psyche that I was so devastated. And she was like the mama to our whole family. So the whole family was devastated. It was a sudden death. And there was no one there for me. And I was lost. And so after that, I didn't realize it, but I had developed a phobia, I think, to death. So in some ways, I think that the death experiences that I've had have been the corrective experience. I'm not advising that, but that has been some of the corrective experience for me. But also what happened after my own near-death experience, I went into, I'm trying to make this a shorter story, but I went into exploration with transcendental meditation, with working with my breath. And to me, breath is the key component between what separates us from birth, life, and death. And so it became like a no-brainer. It was like, oh my goodness, breath is like the fuel. It's like the train between the worlds. And so I immersed myself in my 20s into the study of the breath and in holotropic breath work and rebirthing in many different forms of Eastern breath, all kinds of breathing, Paramahansa Yogananda's science of breath. And I found that what worked for me is having breath work experiences. Because when we do the breath work, and my form of breath work that I birthed almost 30 years ago, I called it shamanic breath work. The shamanic word itself means walking between the worlds, between birth, death, and rebirth. So having a rebirth, and you talked about, Scott, about how to go into altered states without taking psychedelics. I don't take psychedelics anymore, but I do shamanic breath work, and I teach other people to do it. And everyone almost that I know of who has had a fear of death, who does shamanic breath work, loses their fear of death because they experience their death. They experience rebirth in this powerful altered state that is a reality. Altered state doesn't mean it's fantasy. It's just another state of consciousness. And when we can experience it in that greater consciousness, it downloads and informs our everyday, ordinary what I call everyday, ordinary, rush hour traffic consciousness is informed by that other consciousness that there are many worlds besides the one we function in the outer world every day.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I hope, Mary, let us know if that's helpful. There's a couple more comments that have come in that I want to read, and then we'll hear from Suzanne and Sharon. And because we were talking about leaving people alone, Susan Woolridge writes, my mom told me she wanted to hold my hand when she died. At 4 a.m., I felt a force driving me out of her room. I left for a brief nap at home, and Mom died while I was gone for just an hour. At first, I felt that I had failed her, but then I realized we were so close she just couldn't leave while I was lying near her, holding her hand. That's a beautiful story, Susan. And then Joni, writing from Unify, writes, good morning. I was with a friend at hospice years ago. I let her know that I loved her and it was okay to go towards the light. I held her hand for a while, then I intuitively let her be alone. She died shortly later. Hearing what you just said gives me peace that letting her be alone at those very last moments was the right choice. I also have the ability to connect with others on the other side. So thank you for your comments. And here is a comment with a question. So hopefully Suzanne or Sharon perhaps can tackle this one from Chrysalis. And it's a difficult situation that Chrysalis describes. My father and I are co-caretaking my mother who has advanced dementia. My father has been less able to acknowledge my mother's dying process. I feel that I've been on the other end where I keep wanting her to stay in the process of dying. I'm trying to find a way to work with him while not being confrontative about it. Any perspective would be appreciated. Sharon or Suzanne? Sharon.
I wanted to mention also the comment to the fear. And regarding the fear, when I'm with patients that have a phobia or a tremendous fear of death and they have a hard time adjusting to the family that is dying, one of the things I do tell them is it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have fear. You know, we want them to allow that fear to be present. Like again, work with the breath. And sometimes I've sat and I provided shoulder massages to moms and spouses and other people in the room, family members outside of the patient themselves, just to be able to allow them to help with the fear. So if you have someone that can help you with that at home, anxiety, some type of self-care to allow you to process your anxiety as well while you're going through the dying process with your family member, your loved one. That's something that's important. And also when you're dealing with other family members that have not accepted that the family members dying, one of the things that you can do is, of course, you want to just respect that process for them, that they have not come to the place that you have come to with the person that's passing. So you have to give them space to be able to move through that process on their own. And one of the things you would do, and that you would definitely have what we call an unconditional positive regard for their feelings. And that means you would be able to accept where they are, how they feel at that time, and it's okay. And it may seem like a lot more on you because you don't have that person that you can bounce your emotions off with or talk to in the presence and feel like you're going through it alone, but you're not. You have spirit guiding with you, you have your loved ones with you, you have your angels with you, you have everyone in the spirit world, everyone, even your person that's passing, you have all the love, even though they may not be able to communicate with you. Just remember in your heart and just hold that space and understand that you're serving as a loving companion and supporting them on their journey, and just hold that with you, and that'll help you through the process.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Something that I so appreciate that she just said is it's so important for us to support the caregivers. And because I walked my wife through her death about 10 years ago, actually, and I'm a coach, I work a lot with couples. The moment they find out that the father, or the mother, or the wife, or the husband has a terminal disease, they call Scott. And honestly, I enjoy ministering to the people who are getting ready to pass, but I give extra attention to the caregivers because they're the ones often that actually need even more support. The person who's getting ready to pass is everybody coming and loving them up and telling them how much I love you. Whereas, the caregivers, cleaning up the bed and making the food and, doing all the hard stuff. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to go to Suzanne. I haven't heard from her for a little bit.
I was thinking, the fear of death, manifests as, it can be a fear of one's own death, of course, as some people have talked about here, but it can also be, the fear of somebody else dying. And I'm also a hospice volunteer, so I think this is a common experience that we see as hospice volunteers. But I also see it, once the person has died, and the family, of course, has to decide, or sometimes the person decided ahead of time, what they want to, do with the body. And, while I am a farmer and I write about green burial, I also help to operate a green burial ground in the Hudson Valley in New York State that we opened in 2014. And so I am dealing with families all the time, and the fear of death is very often present, especially before the person has died. But the thing about green burial is all about what I mentioned before. It's all about recognizing this connection to nature. It's all about giving a gift back to the natural world for a nature that has supported us for so long. It's about binding that relationship. It's about being good to the earth by not polluting it. It's about caring for the woods or a meadow or some other wild space in perpetuity. But it's also about caring for families and helping them through this transition in a way that's meaningful for them. And very often, conventional death practices in the U.S. have cut people off from those rituals and from those practices. They've kind of truncated the experience. Very often, conventional burials can be quite quick. For instance, 15 minutes at the grave. Green burials are as much about these environmental components and these nature components as they are about giving the family as much time as possible to work through whatever they need to work through. The burials very often go on for much, much longer, an hour, sometimes two. Families can participate in pulling the body to the gravesite, for instance. They can participate in lowering the body into the grave. They can fill the grave back up. They can have whatever kind of rituals they want in that space. And I've seen the woods really transformed by the kinds of things that families have brought into that space, that kind of ritual space. And so, speaking to the fear of death, these practices, I think, in a way, are remaking, re-meaning things for families and interrupting some of that fear, pushing it off in some ways, remaking the fear into something that is, for a long time after the funeral, people make these wild spaces. Our green burial ground is one of these spaces, places that they visit, not just as cemeteries, right? Not just a place to bond with the dead, but a place to bond sort of with the natural, enduring world. And so that fear I see continually through every burial, made and remade. And it's really quite amazing to witness.
Suzanne, this might be a good time. I do have your PowerPoint,
Oh, yeah.
so I'm going to bring it up, and I just will need for you to tell me when to click to the next page.
So this is actually the entrance to the natural burial ground that we opened in 2014 in the Hudson Valley, in New York's Hudson Valley. You can see that it's the entrance into a wild space, into the woods. It's a young hardwood forest. Yeah, you can go to the next one. So you can see this is a burial cart. Many of the green burial grounds, and there are about a little over 300 in the US right now, and that's been over the last 2 decades of work or so that have grown up in the US. Many of them use a burial cart like this because cars are very often not allowed into these wild spaces. And as you can see here, it's the family pulling the body into that space rather than sort of being driven into it by a funeral director.
Wow.
Yeah, so green burial is all about the use of no embalming, no modern casket. That means no treated hardwoods, no metals, no burial vault. Many folks choose to be shrouded, and it can be, shocking in a way for people who have never seen a shrouded body before. And so, it is the work of the cemetery personnel and funeral directors or people who are caring for the dead to, let people know that this is what they're going to be seeing, if this is what the dying person wanted, or if this is what the family wanted. This is actually at Steelmantown Cemetery in southern New Jersey.
It's beautiful.
This is our burial ground in the winter. We had snow a few years ago. So you can see the kind of this journey to the grave is something actually that I write about in the book that we don't see really any longer in conventional burials, where people drive up to the grave and walk over right to the spot. So there is sort of a journey into the woods. Very often it's ritualized either religiously or through other spiritual ways that families sort of decide upon by themselves. Very often there's music. I think the next one is a journeying image as well. This is at a burial ground, a very large conservation burial ground where they're conserving like 1,000 acres in part through green burial. So they can only access in South Central Washington State, they can only access some of the burial areas by horse. So that's what this is. This is in our natural burial ground in New York, in Hudson Valley. So you can see this is usually how the burial grounds set up the burial. There's none of that sort of faux grassy drape. All of the soil that's taken out of the hole is placed next to the hole, as in, say, like a Jewish burial, so that the families can fill the grave back up. You can see straight into the hole. The hole is actually, unlike in a conventional burial ground, about 3.5 feet, because that's the best depth for decomposition, for swift decomposition. And then those boards are there for family members to stand on to lower the body into the grave, and also to help fill the grave back up. This is another example of that. This is in at a conservation burial ground in Ohio, and you can see, so our space is wooded. This is prairie. So they take all different shapes. Sometimes they're meadows, sometimes they're deep woods, sometimes they're pristine, well preserved, old growth spaces, and some are really kind of like young hardwood forests, scrappy in a way, which is what ours is, and we're sort of nurturing the woods to come back to something more vibrant and beautiful. The soil mound there is very often laid over for preparation, as you can see here, with flowers, cut flowers or boughs. We do that both for decorative purposes, but also for practical purposes. Once the body is placed in the ground, this, what we call biomatter, is placed on top of the body. It actually aids in decomposition. It's also helpful for families if the body is shrouded to kind of have a bit of a cushion for when the soil is placed in the hole. And so here's an image of a family participating. This is actually at a green burial ground outside of Austin, Texas. So this would be really a common view of what happens at a green burial. Children, adults, all participating in the lowering of the body into the grave.
Oh.
Yeah, so you can see kind of in the back that they're starting to fill the grave back up. And there's everybody's welcome. Also another lowering to the grave. I think that on Friday night, someone had mentioned the decorating of caskets. Very often this is done on cardboard. Sometimes it's done on pine boxes, which is really nice. It gives family ahead of time a way to say goodbye and to another way of participating into the process, either by drawing on it or painting on it. And this is an image of the shrouded body in the grave.
Beautiful. That is a beautiful, beautiful image and photograph. Wow.
And the after. So as I might have said, all of the soil that's taken out of the hole is placed next to the grave, and then all that soil is placed back in the hole, which is not done in a conventional cemetery. In a conventional cemetery, a lot of the dirt is carted off, and that's because a vault is placed in there and it takes up a lot of the space in addition to the casket. And also they level the grave out so that they can plant the grass. But in most natural burial grounds, the soil is put back on, and then it's basically has to be mounded up because you have to wait for the grave to settle for it to get flat again. And so these mounds really, for some time, sometimes a couple of years, actually become the memorial site. And you'll see this right away as families, leave and decorate the flowers with decorate the graves with flowers. We had a grave that, and this wasn't the one, it was a Mexican-American funeral. They had a 7-piece mariachi band that was in there for 2 hours. But the family still comes and decorates the mound in this manner. And I think if you go to the next slide, you can see sort of the mound becomes the memorial site, and the next one too. Oh wait, what is it? Is there it is.
Aww.
Yeah. So, and then eventually, I mean, in this case, they decided to do this with it, but in our natural burial ground, eventually the mound will settle, and then people will usually put a marker, and the mound disappears. I think that's the last slide. Oh, no, there's one more. You can see. So those are the markers, the kind of markers, natural stone markers that we permit.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. There are some questions that have come in about green burial, so I'm going to go ahead and go to those, and then, of course, we'll go to Star Wolf and Sharon. First off, Belinda writes, in the photos last night, life was brought to the dying, and in these photos, heaven is brought to the living. And that's a beautiful way of putting it. And for those of you wondering, last night we had this gentleman from India who showed photos of how they work with people in rural India areas, preparing them. Okay, here are the questions. Let's see, here we go. I'm trying to find the actual questions. Magnon asks, is the body shredded? Is it cut into pieces beforehand?
No.
Okay. Kuselis asks, 3.5 feet deep for green burials. I wonder, is that less or more than what is considered, quote, standard with cemeteries?
It's less. So typically it's around 5, it's at least 5, it's usually 5 feet. Some cemeteries do double deep graves. It's not that common. They'll be even deeper. But 3.5 feet is standard for, 3.5 to 4 feet is standard for green burial grounds.
Okay. And George asks, Suzanne, how can we get our local woods accepted as burial field? I'd imagine it's illegal in many places and that the body could be disturbed in other wild situations.
This is requires a long answer, but it really depends upon where you live, what your local ordinances say, what your cemetery laws are in the state where you live. So there are a lot of factors that are in play. And so all those things would need to be researched ahead of time.
Okay. All right. I think that covers the questions. We'll get more of Suzanne later, but I want to give Sharon and Starwolf a chance. Thank you. That was really, really interesting. Very, very beautiful. Thank you so much. Starwolf, I'm going to you next. Anything that comes up for you that you'd like to share based on what you just saw, or is this a good time for us to do a little practice that you had suggested?
I'd like to do the practice, but first I'd like to thank Suzanne and of course Sharon both for the beautiful work that you're doing. I just am so touched, and the having been one who was affected negatively by the death of my grandmother and the drama that was around it and the whole way that it all happened, it was a really serious wound that sent me down a path that could have destroyed my life. So how we deal with being born, we know that now, how we deal with coming into this world and not making it a medical problem, and not making it a medical problem when we die, when we leave. This is really what I think you're talking about, all of us here. For me, the overlay is the shamanic world, because the shamanic world says that we're all born, we all die, we all come, we all go, that the first thing we do is take in what? Breath, and we're alive. And the last thing we do is exhale. and let go. And that's our last act. Our first act is to breathe in, and our last one is to breathe out. And in between that first breath and the last breath, we have thousands of breaths, but we don't always embody and fully live, especially if we're caught up in anxiety and fear, and other aberrations that have happened in our lifetime. So the shamanic work that Scott, that we do, that many of us do, and I really consider what you all are doing is shamanic work, whether you see it that way or not. But the shamanic work is really about bridging the worlds between birth, death, and rebirth. So that in between the birth and the death, that we're here to live. A big part of dying is also about living and being able to fully let go and do little deaths all the time. Every time we make a change, to breathe into it and to let go and practice dying to what we're letting go and birthing something new. So, Scott, if this is a good time, then we can do a few minutes of breathing. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on just a short journey, just 5 minutes of music. And this is some music that I helped bring together with a friend of mine and with some shaman friends that created this piece of music. But it's a lot longer. Obviously, it's an hour, but I'm going to just put 5 minutes on. And I'm going to invite our people who are with us today, everybody that's on, to breathe with us. And you might say, well, I'm already breathing. But sometimes we're not. We're holding our breath. We're breathing shallow. We're breathing really fast. And we're not fully breathing. So the shamanic breathwork journey process is to breathe in, and I'll just demonstrate for a moment. Breathing in fully, if you can, through your nose, and if you can't, you can breathe through your mouth. But to breathe fully in through your nose like this, fill yourself all the way up, and then out through your mouth. And right as you get to the point where the breath is fully out, where you feel like you fully exhaled, pulling the breath in again through the nose. So it looks like this in a rhythmic fashion. You can even use your hands. The music will help activate and help you move the breath. And if you did just now, just those 3 breaths, you already feel expanded. And you might be asking yourself, why do this? Well, there's a lot of health benefits that I don't really have time to go into right now, but proven health benefits. But one of the biggest reasons that I take people into shamanic breathwork experiences is to experience death to the old and rebirth to the new, so that they can make real changes in their lives. The whole fear of death is not only about dying, it's about change. It's about letting something go. And if we can practice shamanic breath work, and I just say this, Scott, I was with my husband, my late husband, who passed almost 8 years ago. We did breath work together. And as he passed, basically in my arms, we laid down together and we did shamanic breath work together. That was the last thing he was doing, was breathing when he took his last breath. So this is a way that can also be useful for people who are working with dying, is to work with people to exit their body consciously. But today we want to embody. Today we want to let something die, something go that we're afraid to let go of. So let's see if we can do that in 5 minutes. Okay, let me scoot over here, get down to, okay. So take a deep breath, exhale fully, and begin to breathe. And I'm not going to talk over it. I'm just going to let you breathe to the music. Breathing in, you can start now. Breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Breathe until you're surprised for the next 5 minutes.
Phil. Thank you for that. Thank you. Certainly want to invite anybody who had an experience to pop it in the chat box, either here in our Zoom room or anybody watching on Unify, and I'll read those comments. And thank you, Star Wolf, for reminding us just the simplicity of breathing and paying attention to our breath. And since we've just been hearing from you, I am going to go to your website for a moment. And this is her website, and I want to invite everybody to check it out. It's shamanicbreathwork.org, shamanicbreathwork.org, and you just have written a brand new book. Tell us about your new book.
Well, several years ago, I wrote Shamanic Breathwork, a different book that was on there, actually. And I think in many ways it was ahead of its time. So I recently had the opportunity, I was invited to write another book on shamanic breathwork. And this time I brought together 26 of our lead facilitators worldwide from several countries. And each one of them wrote a story about the breath and how it changed their lives, and how particularly shamanic breathwork changed their lives, and why they were called to go out and become, in some ways, I would say shamanic doulas for people who are still alive and needing to face death every day with something they need to change. And so we're agents of change. We're forces of nature. The nature of change is the subtitle. The nature of change, returning to nature. That's why I so love what Susan and Sharon was sharing, going back to nature, because nature is what changes us. And one of the pieces, of course, that I believe changes us most is to breathe and to face our fears and face our joys and to go fully into the experience. We're not fully alive if we're not fully breathing. And so this is just came out, and I'm happy to say that it's already gotten about close to 60 reviews. What's it have? 59 5-star reviews on Facebook, and it was a number one bestseller in 8 categories. So just breathe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Star Wolf. And there are some comments coming in of what people experienced. Alan wrote, very interesting. Christine said, thank you so much, everyone. In breath, out breath, giving and receiving. All is one. Claudine writes, I reached a place beyond thought, connecting with my light council. Thank you for this gift of breath today. Beautiful. Steph wrote, I felt my body pulsing at a faster rate than the breath. And Melinda writes, a white butterfly. I've never seen this before in meditation. So thank you again for that, Star Wolf. And you'll have a chance to say one last, we'll come back to you one more time. But I'm going to go now to Sharon. And Sharon texted me this morning and shared that she had kind of a unique personal experience, which I believe she's going to share a little bit. And I have downloaded both of those videos. So just let me know when you're ready and I'll pull them up to play. But go ahead and tell us the story first.
You can just play the longer one. I can incorporate the smaller one into the longer video. So that would be best. Yes. So I had it all planned out what I was going to discuss today. I had spent the last week I'm going to talk about, what a death doula is. We're non-medical professionals that support caregivers, patients, families during the grieving process. I was headed all just, spirits. It's like, no. I woke up literally this morning, and my dear friend Hans, who I lost, same as Hans Hansen, he recently passed of cancer. Sorry, I get a little emotional. Back in September of 2021, and he came to me in spirit this morning. He was like, why are you not talking about our experience? You were a doula for me, and it was the greatest gift you could have given me. Why are you not talking about this? Why are you not sharing this with the world? And I was like, oh, I have memories, I have photos, I have everything. This would be perfect to share this experience. It was so beautiful. So I had to just message Scott. I'm like, I have to change what I want to talk. And I just send you these photos and these images. And just, he came to me and he just said, share this with the world, this beautiful experience. And the story behind it is that for me, I've always been connected spiritually to numbers. How my first spiritual awakening happened back in 2009. And I began my path toward hospice work. Actually, as a volunteer, I started seeing number synchronicities, 1111, 222, 444. And I just thought it was just odd. They were everywhere. I felt these numbers were just haunting me. I was like, I can't get away from these numbers. I would pay for something and it would be $7.77. It was just crazy to me. So interestingly enough, I started to research, the phenomenon behind numbers and how spirit communicates with us in so many different, fashions. You may be finding a penny, or, you may hear, spiritual whispers, or, you will see with your mind's eye and your sight before you things that seem, to you to be odd or coincidental, but they have more spiritual meaning behind them. So over the last 2 years, I have been seeing the number 947, probably for about 2 years. And I was just like, okay, 947. I didn't really think anything behind it because actually my birthday is September 4th, 1974. So to me, I was like, okay, I'm always seeing 947. That's my birthday number. So I always kept that in my mind as a wink from spirit, just letting me know that I'm on my right path. Things are going well. I love seeing that message. But this past September on my birthday, 9/4, I was actually called by my dear friend Diane to the bedside of my dear friend Hans, who had began his transition on my birthday, 9/4. I spent the course of 3 days, 9/4 through 4 through the 7th, with him at bedside as he transitioned. And as my dear friend Kaleo likes to say, as he changed addresses. So I have put this video together of pictures of time I spent with Hans, his mom, my dear friend, and his family as we sat with him bedside during his transition. And I would love to play that. And I have a little video or a voice recording of him at the end because he was a psychic medium. He was a paranormal investigator and he had a radio show. And I have a little bit of his voice recording at the end.
Okay.
So it'd be great to hear.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for sharing this. Oh, and hang on, I just want to make sure that I've got the sound. Yeah, I do. Okay.
Didn't have music to it, sorry. This is Diane. This is Hans' mom, my dear friend. Hans was about 54 years old when he transitioned. Diane says it's her favorite picture of her and Hans. Diane was resting. This is Peggy, a dear friend of Hans. She was giving me a little relief while she was sitting bedside while I was getting a little break. Diane finally went to sleep. We were so happy to see her get some rest. Mm-hmm. Passed away. This is Hans. I did an interview with him, but this recording is not from this particular incident, but you'll hear his voice.
We all have a series of guides and angels that are put out with us, and they have volunteered and they're assigned to us through God and the universe to help us. Their purpose is simply this, to help us along our journey. okay, and help us to help ourselves. We have teachers, we have guides, these different ones, spirits that they work with us behind the scene. They're the voices that say, don't make a right turn, make a left turn, this kind of thing. And then it turns out to be exactly what you needed to find out and meet and hear and everything. Here's what happens is that people say, well, how do I hear my angels? All you need to do is ask them. Your guides and your angels, here's how I explain it. It's like a spiritual toolbox. In a toolbox, you'll have a pair of pliers, screwdriver, hammer, etc. Every tool in your toolbox has a specific job. The same with your guides and your angels, okay? And sometimes you'll have grandma and grandpa or loved ones that'll come because they love you so much and you're so important that they want to volunteer their existence at this time to help you as well. And they may step in and say, let me help you with this, let me help you with this, based upon whatever their specialty was in their spirit. And what happens is that people don't ask for help, okay? To me, that's like having the fire department outside your house. Your house is on fire, but you didn't ask for help, so they're not going to help you, and you're burning your house down. But people say, why won't somebody help me? Why won't somebody help me? They're there, just simply ask for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this very, very personal experience. And it's again, just an opportunity for us to remember what a tender, but also precious and beautiful time it is when we are with someone that is passing. Oh, you muted, Sharon.
It was a very heavy moment for me because I was acting as a doula, but I was so personal to the situation. It was my dear friend and, Hans and Diane. And I was still trying to, of course, work in my profession as a doula. And we are, we have boundaries that we create, of course, with our clients. So it was very personal. It was just balancing the energy of being professional, but yet being personal was a new dynamic for me in the role of a doula. But, it all worked out. I think some of the things that I would say that I did that I probably wouldn't have done professionally as a doula, like the amount of hours I kept, we don't necessarily recommend doing that as a doula because you have to do a lot of self-care to be able to keep yourself together so you can be of service. So I kept long hours. I mean, they're like 20, I think the whole 3 days, 72 hours, I was constantly working, in the situation. I was overnight with Diane, I was it was just the experience was just grand. I can't even put it into words. It was beautiful. I'm still emotional about it. Just seeing the pictures just touched me again, but I just was so happy that I had the opportunity to be there for him and for Diane, and it's just beautiful. Thanks for letting me share on this platform.
Well, since we've just had some really beautiful moments here with Sharon, you can learn much more about her and the services she provides. And she has a beautiful website. It's thegooddeathexperience.com. thegooddeathexperience.com. And I'll put all of these in the chat box a little bit later on. But if you go to her website, there's a lot of good things here. And if you go to contact, you can fill in, and that's really important, so you can get her information from her. But there's also something else that I really appreciated. Let me go back and find it. If you go down where it says survey form, see if you qualify for the Good Death Experience. And I really like that she's laid out some really important things we need to look at. Do you have a will? Does my family know where I keep my records? I'm already no on 2 of these things. So this is a really good survey for all of us to take to kind of be aware and to start the process of making sure that we have our affairs in order, especially because sudden death might happen. So this is really beautiful. And then if you go to About Us and Resources, there's all sorts of resources that she's providing. And I think she's going to maybe even add like Suzanne Kelly's Green Burials or Star Wolf's Shamanic Breathing. So thank you very much, Sharon, for all that you are providing. And
I have the book registration on there as well. Sorry. on the
Say again.
on the resource page,
Oh, I'll go back there.
and about us.
Yep.
Go down our team, and you can click on my photo there.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yes, and I can go ahead and mention this. What I've done is I put together a book about my experiences, my journey from hospice to death doula. It's been a, a very tremendous journey of experiences after experience with families and patients and caregivers, the whole journey that, to me, what I felt catapulted me on my true path. I was living and existing, but I truly found my happiness when I became a hospice volunteer, and I kind of got the attention off of myself. And then I started focusing on how I can be of service. And that journey, what I expected to be short in 2009, maybe just a volunteer for a few months, catapulted my life in a complete different direction. And I've, had the opportunity to make a difference in so many people's lives. And I write about the experiences I've had with several families, and the whole journey is there. So you can go to the website and submit for notifications for when the book will be launching. It should be close to the end of the last quarter of this year.
Great. So this is, again, if you go there, go to resources, click on her picture, and if you head down, that's where you can sign up to receive book release notifications. Thank you so much, Sharon, for the wonderful work you're doing, for being on our show. You'll have one last chance to say goodbye. Thank you so much, but we'll see you in a moment. I want to read some of the comments that have come in from our friends on Unify. Joni writes, "This is so good. I cannot imagine not asking for spiritual guidance and help for myself and for others." So she's really referencing what we heard Hans have to say in his audio. Matthew writes, "I had the thought the other day that it's important for us to have a natural death. I'm realizing through these discussions this weekend that there may be a correlation with what Dolores Cannon discovered through quantum healing hypnosis therapy. She found that when we become attached to the human experience through negative focus, we can essentially be trapped in a form of hell. I feel that this form of compassion and natural burial is a way to heal those wounds and those fears. Thank you." And Marie writes, also from Unify, "Departures is a very beautiful and brilliant movie about death." So that's a good thing to know about Departures. I am going to show a video. Those of you who were with us last night, you saw Gary Malkin, and this is a video that Gary provided. He plays the music, and it's from Thich Nhat Hanh, all about the end of suffering. And I thought that this would be a nice video for us to watch, and then each of our guests will have one last chance to share a couple of words. Thank you, everybody, and it's a beautiful video, and I think you'll all enjoy it and understand why I wanted to play it today. That's interesting. Let's see. There we go.
May the sound of this bell penetrate deep into the cosmos. Even in the darkest spots, living beings are able to hear it clearly, so that all suffering in them cease, understanding come to their heart, and they transcend the path of sorrow and death. Ba nghiệp lặng thân tình gửi lòng theo tiếng chuông, nguyện người nghe tình thức vượt thoát nẻo đau buồn. The universal Dharma door is already open. The sound of the rising tide is heard clearly. The miracle happens. A beautiful child appears in the heart of a lotus flower. One single drop of this compassionate water is enough to bring back the refreshing spring to our mountains and rivers. Nghe chuông phiền não tan mây khói, lặng thân an miệng mỉm cười. Hơi thở nương chuông về chánh niệm, vườn tâm hoa tuệ xinh tươi. Listening to the bell, I feel the afflictions in me begin to dissolve. My mind calm, my body relaxed. A smile is born on my lips. Following the sound of the bell, my breath brings me back to the safe island of mindfulness. In the garden of my heart, the flowers of peace bloom beautifully. Phổ môn vọng tiếng tiểu dưng bé thơ xuất hiện giữa lòng đóa sen. Cơm lộ một giọt rưới lên xuân về trên khắp mọi miền núi sông. Phổ môn vọng tiếng tiểu dưng bé thơ xuất hiện giữa lòng đóa sen. Cơm lộ một giọt rưới lên xuân về trên
Beautiful. We haven't heard from Suzanne for a little bit. And so I'm going to bring you on, Suzanne.
Yeah, maybe I'll just respond to that a little bit. I think I said before, green burial it's the most environmentally sound way of caring for the dead, right? And many people choose it because of that. But it also, I think, speaking to this Thich Nhat Hanh film, and also the work of our other presenters here today, it also gives us an opportunity to be present in a way that we wouldn't otherwise have. When Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about the bell, right? And being present to death, when he hears the bell, it gives us an opportunity to be present and present to death. And green burial really does give us that opportunity of having these practices that allow us to engage in a particular way, but really be present. And that participation, as Thich Nhat Hanh was saying in here, he wasn't saying it about these practices, but that presence, being present, is what ultimately brings us peace, right? It's only through that being totally present that we will bring peace to ourselves. So I think that's one of the things that I see over and over in the burial grounds when families participate in these practices, that there is a solace that comes through the participation, and that participation is all about being present.
Beautiful. Well, we didn't get a chance to go to your website, so we're going to do that now. And it's her name, Suzanne, Suzanne, and then the initial M, Kelly, Kelly. And Suzanne has a wonderful book, which is really kind of a classic, the book Greening Death. And this has really been a book that has helped to shift people's attention and awareness. And you can get the book on Amazon. Anything you want to share about the book itself or the impact it's had, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think, the book is an amalgamation of both my experiences being in sort of the grassroots green burial movement for the last 2 decades or so. So I started in the movement in around 2000, and it was just a kind of burgeoning movement. There was only one green burial ground at that time. So it has that kind of grassroots component that's about people waking up to these practices, ones that have been sort of forced underground. These kind of subjugated knowledges, that we talk about, the ones that are kind of pushed to the margins, the things that we're not supposed to see or think about, even though this is the way that we cared for our dead 150 years ago, they've started percolating to the surface, and almost in a collective unconscious way. And over the last 2 decades, we have seen people waking up to these practices in communities large and small across the US. So the book captures some of that, but it also captures the kind of philosophical and idea sort of underpinning of what enabled our conventional practices to take root in the first place and got us away from these ways of caring for our dead. So it's a kind of mixture of the kind of practical and philosophical.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that work. And any other final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today?
Oh, for me?
Yes, you.
Well, I would encourage you, if you're interested in green burial, to, in addition to my book, the Green Burial Council is a not-for-profit organization that basically sets standards for green burial grounds around the US, and they certify green burial grounds, and they have a lot of information on their website. They have forms on there actually that can help you also do some planning around green burial if you're interested in doing that. What we see in our natural burial, in our cemetery, because this is also connected to a conventional burial ground, originally it's a municipal cemetery, is that, natural burial is the trend. We're outselling plots there like 5 to 1. But what we see over and over again is that most people pre-plan their green burials because there aren't a lot of green burial grounds in the US. And so if you're interested in having a green burial, I would suggest that you try to do some research ahead of time, try to scope out what's available in your community, and also to let your family know, along with what Sharon was saying about this planning, let your family know that this is something that you want. Because at the time of death, so much is happening so quickly that it's hard to make these things happen at the last minute. So that's a really good resource for people.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed your presentation, those beautiful visuals, and thank you for bringing your beautiful love of farming and spirituality into such a practical support for our world. Thank you.
So much.
I'm going to go to Starwolf next for any final thoughts you'd like to share.
I've really enjoyed all the presentations too, Scott. So thank you for having such wonderful guests on. And for me, I think that if I want to have a good death, then maybe I also want to think about having a good life. And in order to live a good life, I need to be able to meet the seasons of my life and what comes into my life, and to be able to release what needs to be released, and to give it a good death, to let it go, to transform it, to not hold on to things so tightly. And the only way I've really learned how to do that is to be fully present. And I don't know of a way to become more present than to breathe and let go and then receive, and to see how freely the universe brings me my life, and how when it's time that it will take that life back into itself, and I'll become something else somewhere else. So in between the breath of taking in and releasing, I am a part of nature. And this is a very important part of what we teach as well with our programs and the things that we do, is to learn to fully embrace nature, the nature of change, that we are water, we are earth, we are the fires, we are the breath, the air, and that there is a spirit, an unknown, an unseen, sometimes seen, that animates through us all of these elemental parts of ourselves. We are elemental beings. We're not apart from nature, we're a part of it. So I love it going, as Suzanne has said, going back into nature, that we're a part of that. But then also it feels like going back into nature, getting in between before we go into the ground, to be here fully on the earth, above the earth, and to be doing what it is that we've come to do, and being what it is that we've come to be, and being able to transform more easily. So that's a big part of what I want to continue to share. That's a part of the message. And we're not going to have time to do it here. I did have a little clip on just our land here, because that's part of what we're doing. And Scott, this is the last thing I will say, is that several years ago, now when I lived out in California, I had a vision with my good friend, Nikki Scully. We took trips to Egypt and took people on trips, and I still take people on trips. I just came back from Egypt in December. But we had a breathwork experience together. And in that experience, I heard the voice that told me to leave, for whatever reason, to leave California and go find land. And I didn't want to do that. I loved where I was. And it nodded me and nodded me. And then eventually I followed that voice. And in 2003, we found this land in Western North Carolina on top of a mountain. We didn't think, we went through a lot to be able to shepherd this land and to care for it. But we decided not to build a lot of buildings. There's a lot of buildings here, but we decided that what people needed was to come to nature and to be in elemental temples. So our temples are an open air pavilion to do breath work, a fire arch from Burning Man that you walk through that's on fire, to walk and do fire walks outside. We have a beautiful medicine wheel that's out here. Each stone weighs over 2,000 pounds, and it's 2 tons, and it's on top of the mountain. So we spend time in these elemental temples that all represent the different temples of nature, or the Neteru, as the Egyptians say, the great netters, and we breathe.
Thank you so much. Perhaps when I come to visit my friends in Nashville, I'll get a chance to see your beautiful temples. And thank you for blessing us with wisdom. And again, a reminder to everybody that this might be a wonderful person to work with if you're wanting to really learn how to use breath to have little experiences of leaving the body. So thank you so much for that. So, all right, and I just want to give Sharon one last chance. Anything you'd like to share in conclusion, Sharon? Spotlight's on you.
Thank you. This has been great. It's been amazing. Oh, yes, definitely. I would like to speak to why I actually titled the book, The Good Death Experience, and I actually decided to go along with that with the services I provide, as because, so with the Medical Institute, they define a good death as one that is free of avoidable stress and suffering for patients, families, and caregivers, and in accordance with the families and patients' wishes. And another thing that me as a doula, I wanted to highlight is the experience, because you have the family involved, you have the caregivers, you have patients. There's so many dynamics to the scenario. And we want to make sure that the highlight is not only just on the patients, but we want to make sure that the care team, and me working, as I've had also 10 years experience working in the healthcare field as well. So I understand that healthcare professionals, the experience is important for them as well. So we want to make sure that everyone is considered in the death experience, because we're a world of experience. That's why we go to Disneyland. We have wonderful dinners. We have avions. There's things that it's the experience that we remember. You pass away and you want your loved ones to remember that you left them with a beautiful experience, not to remember how stressful it was, or, they didn't get a chance to grieve properly, or because they were so caught up into trying to untangle your business. So if you have an opportunity to get your business in order prior to your passing, that's definitely a gift that you can leave to your loved ones as a good death experience. And another thing, as a doula, I wanted to say 3 things that I've learned on my journey: that silence is okay. Sometimes we feel as though we need to have the right thing to say when someone's transitioning or passing. It's okay to be silent and just to be a present, supportive, peaceful presence for people you love. And I learned a lot about cultural competency. Different cultures, celebrate end of life in different ways. You don't necessarily have to understand it. Again, just be present and accept it as a learning opportunity. And then last but not least, just having unconditional positive regard for other people's feelings. And that's pretty much just accepting where they are in their process. And it's not right, it's not wrong. It's just where they are in their process, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to bring all 3 of our presenters on so we can all twinkle them and send them lots and lots of love, lots of appreciation for their service, and they're spending their morning with us, helping us to learn. So thank you. And I want to conclude with a couple of thoughts. This was the very, very last, not only the last show of the weekend, but the last show of our, what we're calling our winter season, 3 months and 13 weeks of Awakening World. And it's been really powerful. Everybody, you can go to our Global Peace Tribe channel on YouTube. And I'm going to bring that up. And there's a lot of wonderful things there. Honestly, I put a lot of effort into this channel. You can find all of our previous shows, including Saturday Night Live, Straight Talk, Sacred Sunday, and The Awakening World. And I've also created where I've taken some of our most dynamic segments. I don't want to say favorite, because I don't want to do anything comparative, but just dynamic segments that people might really enjoy. Reverend Michael Beckwith, Marianne Williamson, and so on and so forth. And some of the people that might not be as famous, but have really powerful things to say. So there's a lot of playlists of popular shows or trailers, favorite interviews, and of course the actual shows themselves. So please go to our YouTube channel. It's a good place to get more information, or to go back and watch the shows you missed, or go back and watch some of the shows that you might really enjoy. And again, I've put a lot into it, so I definitely want people to experience these after shows. And a reminder that this is the last show of the new season. So people do need to register for the new season. And it's easy. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com and you can register there. I'm also going to put a registration link in right now for our new season. And you register once and you get the links for all of our shows for Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday. So please do that. Then the final thing I want to mention is I am going to be going back to teaching courses. This is what I did for years, many, many years, training love coaches. And then I took a 2-year break to really focus on creating all these shows. You know, I've produced 400 live free online shows since the pandemic began. It took up a lot of energy as well as my coaching. But I am going to be teaching a course that's going to start in mid-April. But if you register by April 1st, you can get a pair of bonus classes on April 2nd and again on April 9th. And then the main course starts on April 16th. And the course will be on Saturday mornings, 10 o'clock Pacific time, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And also, if you register before April 1st, you can get a 30% discount by being part of the early bird people. And the details are at lcamasterclass.com. lcamasterclass.com is where you can register. And I'm going to limit it to 30 people, participants, and probably about a half a dozen love coaches, people that have worked with me, trained with me, taken this course previously. I've adapted it a little bit, but it's a powerful course, and we come together as a community. There's also an optional empathy practice group every Wednesday night. So if you're really wanting to improve your relationships, any relationship, whether it's to your family, to your friends, to a beloved, most of all to yourself, we do a lot of work on self-love, because at the foundation of all relationship is quality self-love. And that's what we need to learn how to do. That's what we're here on this planet to do. We're here to learn to love, starting with ourselves. And this course is a powerful way to do that. So I thank you for watching. Please share it out with your friends. Look forward to seeing you. We have great shows planned for the new season. And thank you very much for being with us. And again, thank you to our presenters. And thank you again to all the people who watch. God's blessings, and we'll see you soon. Take care now. Saving the chat.